Working amateur radio satellites was my dream ever since I got my amateur radio license way back in 1985. In those days, I did not have access to any friends working amateur radio satellites. So naturally, I was not able to do it. And in last year, a new LEO satellite repeater contact group was formed in our region, and we started discussing about how to operate LEO satellites. And that is how I started coming up on amateur radio satellites. Operating satellites need a little bit of skill. The ideal way is to have a dual band full duplex handheld radio and a dual band directional antenna, a Yagi antenna. So much better if it's a cross Yagi with much more gain. But I didn't have any of these. My social setup did not permit me to go outside and operate satellites using handheld radios, and the antenna pointed in the direction of the satellite path. That is the simplest way to operate a satellite. You should have dual band handheld radio which is connected through a cable of short length through a dual band antenna, Yagi antenna, and it should have elements for both UHF and VHF. That is because all the satellites which you operate initially are the LEO satellites, or the low Earth orbit satellites, which orbit the Earth around 400 kilometers from the ground. So if you have a directional antenna pointing in the direction of the satellite path, satellite rises and sets like the sun. Only difference is that sun takes about 12 hours to pass from one horizon to another horizon, while most of the satellites take only about 10 minutes to pass from one horizon to another horizon. So it's a very rapid pass. It has both azimuth and elevation. That is, it starts in one direction. Maybe it starts in the southwest, and then it rises up, and when it is a very good pass, it may pass even overhead with you, and then it passes in the direction opposite to it, and it will set in the northeast direction. So this is a typical satellite pass. As the satellites are passing very fast, there is something known as Doppler effect occurring in the signals from the satellites. That is, there is increase in frequency of the signals when the satellite is approaching you, and decrease in frequency when the satellite is moving away from you. So you have to point the antenna in the direction of the satellite, as well as, that is both in azimuth and elevation, as well as you have to change the frequency of your receiver according to the Doppler shift. To get a typical example, the most easy satellite, or I can't call it really a satellite, it is much bigger than a usual amateur radio satellites. You may be aware that most of the amateur radio satellites are CubeSats. One CubeSat unit is just 10 centimeter on one side. So you can imagine a cube of the size of a 10 centimeter. But that is the usual amateur radio satellite. And there are amateur satellites which are smaller also, which are known as pocket cubes, which is only half the dimension. So naturally the volume will be 1/8 only. That is the pocket cubes. So amateur radio on International Space Station is quite different. International Space Station has the size of almost a football ground, quite huge. But the radio is not that huge. You have a radio just like our base stations, and it is capable of higher power. Typically, I am told that amateur radio on International Space Station has an output of 5 watts, and when they have experiments like satellite television experiments, that is slow scan television experiments, SSTV, they will give out outputs up to even 25 to 50 watts. So it's easier to work amateur radio on International Space Station than any other satellite. So most of the beginners like me start off with contacts through the repeater on the amateur radio on International Space Station. That's a repeater with downlink on ultra high frequency or UHF, that is satellite downlink, and you have to uplink on VHF, very high frequency. That is why we need a dual band radio. So our output is on VHF. Typical nominal frequency for the repeater, FM repeater on International Space Station is 145.990 megahertz, and the downlink typical frequency is 437.800 megahertz. But this is the nominal frequency which will be useful when the satellite is at the time of closest approach. When it is nearest to you, it will be at the nominal frequency. But when the satellite is rising, the downlink frequency will be what you feel. Satellite is sending at a fixed frequency, but your radio will be able to hear it at 437.810 megahertz. And when it is setting, you will be hearing it 790 megahertz. That is 10 kilohertz up in the beginning and 10 kilohertz low in the end of the pass. That is a typical satellite cycle. When the satellite appears above the horizon, it is known as acquisition of signal or AOS, and when the satellite sets, it is known as loss of signal or LOS.